Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a special edition of the Rose Experience podcast. I'm joined once again with my good friend Stephen Danton of Two Ton Studios.
How's it going? Great to
Good,
be
man.
here. How you been?
I had a stutter there in the video. I don't know what happened, but are you good?
No, it's fine. I'm good. Yeah.
Good. Life is treating you well, I suppose.
Yeah, working hard but having fun. Doing lots of cool stuff. Yeah,
That's
things
good.
are going well. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm getting over. We were supposed to record this last week.
Yeah.
But,
You're feeling better, right?
When your little guy starts going to daycare, I know this used to be a big pet peeve of mine on podcasts when guys talk about how they're sick and shit. But I don't like little guy gets sick, then it just goes through the entire house. And like my wife is hacking like she smokes three packs of cigarettes a day.
That's too bad.
And this is going on week 2. So
yeah.
I mean, we're fine. It's cold and flu season, but I'm toughing it out,
Good. Nice.
To give you that good content, I'm toughing it out.
Yeah.
So today, we're going to get right into it. But we're going to focus on one game and one game only, and that's the game of the hour, I suppose, which is the Elden Ring.
Yes. Nice.
Got the steel book here, the Elden Ring. Awesome. If you see it in the back, I got that collector's edition.
Oh, beauty.
Yeah, the statuette there.
That's awesome, man. Very nice.
Actually, with that sick ass sword.
Oh yeah, that's insane.
Very impressive.
Yeah. Are we allowed to talk about spoilers, or do we just want to keep it kind of?
Let's preface that right up front. This is not a spoiler cast. This is going to be a breakdown of what we think of the game from both of our standpoints. Stephen comes from a dev standpoint, and obviously we're both huge fans of video games.
Sure.
And I guess I'm going to come out of it from a critic standpoint. I mean, I did once. I've hung my shoes up more or less, but one day this old man used to be a pseudo-professional critic of video games, but I guess we never stopped being a critic in life.
Sure,
at least I know. So that's sort of be like dev versus critic. We may agree, we may not agree, and we'll just let it flow from there. But it's not a spoiler cast per se, but it may delve into spoilers. So if you're wary of anything to do with Elden Ring in terms of spoilers, probably best to avoid and come back to it later. But I will leave that in your beautiful hands. So, yeah, I didn't really write a ton of notes how to get started on this, but I don't know. I guess I'll just start with the general question. How are you enjoying Elden Ring so far? What did you roll as a character, and what's been your broad stroke experience?
Yeah, that's a good way to start. So I finished it 2 weeks ago now.
So you're finished. See, that's another thing. We haven't really even talked about what we're going to talk about.
Right. So it'll be interesting, and because you're earlier on, right? So that'll be good perspective to kind of. So I will say my perspective has evolved from kind of the first bit to the end, right? And so I rolled. I think I just made like a warrior knight or something like that. I can't even remember the names of the characters. To be honest, one of my knocks on From Software is not a knock, but it's almost the character should be like blank slate or like not. Like having the 18, like whatever they have, 9 different character types.
Yeah.
They don't really matter. Like if you're the samurai, you get a katana, which is kind of more powered. And if you can kind of sort of start with different stats, but you end up having the ability, like in all From Software games, to respec.
Yeah, it's pretty. Make it however you want.
You almost need to respec anyway, unless you're like somehow clairvoyant or you read guides before you play.
And we're going to get into that later.
Yeah. And then my overall impression is, I mean, I really, really like the game. It's I haven't sat down and thought about how I would stack rank it against other From Software games, which is probably a smart thing to do. But I really like the game. It is truly, truly massive. Like it is. I would, even at the end when I finished it, I beat the quote unquote last boss. I just ran around. I didn't go New Game Plus right away. I ran around and like looked for other stuff, and I found like 2 or 3 other whole areas that I didn't even find that were just like gigantic and really cool to kind of experience. So from that perspective, it's probably the biggest game I've played, probably in my whole life, actually. Now, as you know, I don't play a ton of AAA games, so maybe other games are like maybe it's as big as The Witcher. I don't know how it compares, but so it's massive. I don't know. At the end, I wanted it to be over, and not. I wasn't kind of like. It wasn't the experience you have at a great movie where like, oh man, it's done, but like, and it was an awesome experience, but I want a bit more.
Okay.
I was like, okay, I've seen everything. I'm done. I just wanted to finish the last couple bosses. And so I guess my last thing I'll say on my impressions, I thought the last stretch of bosses, especially the very last boss, I absolutely hated fighting that last boss. And I've talked to a number of friends that are like, this is bullshit.
It's a common
Yeah,
sentiment, and
yeah,
again, I mean, rather than just jump in on that point, we will build up to that point. But it's stuff that I've heard. So yeah, I mean, my general percentage, I'm much earlier on, and from our first conversation, you'll remember about me is just I have to wait. I can't
mm-hmm.
play these games right now, and again, my point will be underlined with some of the things we're going to talk about later as to why. It's
Yeah,
just it's not worth it. But I started off as a samurai, and as to your point, yeah, like it doesn't really matter. It matters at the beginning, and then you build out from there.
yeah,
But you can be anything you want. Just because I rolled a samurai doesn't mean I can't roll. Become a faith build
right,
later
yeah,
on in the game. So be it. But um, yeah, as to your point about also about the game being massive, I play more AAA games than you.
right,
The scope is beyond impressive. It's really hard to put into words in video game terms in terms of the scope of the game and just the whole. There's a lot of games that just say, it's just go out there, go anywhere and figure it out as you go. But you kind of find that's not true in a lot of games.
right,
It is basically true in this game for better or for worse.
yeah,
Uh, I don't, in terms of scope, like the only thing I can compare it to off the top of my head is Skyrim.
right, yeah,
And like Skyrim, in I finished, what does it matter? I got the platinum trophy on the old PlayStation stuff, but I think at the end, my play clock was like 135 hours in that, and I think though at the end of that, excuse me, I'd seen pretty much all there is to see in that
right,
game. Whereas I don't know after 100. Now I play slower than most people. I
sure,
just do. I sort of take my time and really explore and see everything around. Like if someone will tell me a game, you can finish the game in 15 hours, it'll most likely take me 20.
okay,
That's
yeah,
just the way it is.
yeah,
So Elden Ring is going to be this massive undertaking for me when I really, really go. But Elden Ring's bigger than Skyrim for sure.
yeah,
So I think it is. I mean, other than some PC, CRPGs and things like that. But even then, it's definitely the biggest game for sure.
right, yeah,
Um, and yeah, I can't wait to jump in fully. I probably put about like, I mean, I probably put like 15 hours
okay, yeah,
in, and I've honestly like just put it down for the time being because I never planned to really jump in anyway in terms of like full bore,
right,
but I was having tech issues, like big ones,
yeah,
and I just again 45, 43. I
yeah,
don't play games like that.
yeah,
My
yeah,
time is worth far more to me
right, right,
in my life.
yeah,
And there's way, 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 way too many games out there for
yeah,
me to say I need to play Elden Ring. I lose nothing by
right,
not playing. But
yeah.
anyway, this isn't a conversation about that. This is a conversation
Were you
about
playing on PC or PlayStation or
no
what?
PlayStation 5.
Okay, and you had tech, you had like stuttering and stuff, or
Yeah. Like my meager experience, I've experienced enough, and then I've read a ton about the issues that other people have. One of my pet peeves, I guess we can roll into that
yeah,
as our first sort of breaking down point. It's just one of my biggest pet peeves in terms of tech issues in video games is like when they're widely reported and then you get this one guy, well, I never had any issues, so I don't know what you're talking. Well, okay, come on, man. I'm glad. That is amazing that you
yeah,
didn't
yeah,
have it. No,
yeah,
truly, like that's awesome. Because there's sometimes I play games where people are like this is buggy. I've had literally no issues.
yeah,
But that doesn't mean I just hand wave and dismiss. Like
right,
the thousands and thousands of people are having like game breaking glitches that are erasing saves or things of that nature. Not saying that exactly is happening here,
right,
but there's AI resets on dragon fights, and there's a myriad. This game, bottom line is, it's a buggy game with massive tech issues.
yeah. I had
And
actually problems on the PC build. It wouldn't even run for me until I forced my graphic. For some reason, on Windows 11, it would only recognize my onboard graphics card. So
wow,
it
really?
wouldn't recognize my dedicated graphic card. So I had to go in and tell DirectX or Windows actually using device settings to like force it to use the GPU, and then it was fine because otherwise it would like load up and run at like 2 frames a second and crash.
Yeah.
And that took it took me like half an hour of like Googling and trying a
And
bunch
what's
of
your
stuff.
graphics card in
I
your?
have a 2080, whatever, T something.
Okay, so what can you
Yeah,
run? This is great though. You're on PC, on PS5. We can give two different ideas. Like,
yeah.
so what spat like
I ended up
uh,
running it at 1920. I didn't run it like I could, theoretically you could try to run it at 4K, but it got slower. So
okay, so how
I
many
ran it
frames
at
per
basically
second
like
would you get?
2K. Yeah,
How many
and
frames per second would you get?
it never felt slow. It would stutter a lot. Like it definitely and that feels like almost like when you're playing. Remember all the old? I don't know if you ever played Ultima Online, like the
I
old.
didn't, but I
Okay,
think
but
I know
there
where
was
you're going.
and the old MMORPGs. Maybe they even have. I haven't played an MMORPG like World of Warcraft in ages, but like those old ones had a lot of problems with like rubber banding or elasticing or whatever.
Yeah,
It seems
it
like
was
it
just
has that problem.
leapfrog,
Yeah,
and then you
yeah,
leapfrog forward through time. Yeah,
yeah. And I was actually watching a speedrunner, the guy who has the world record, right, or did at least, and
yeah.
did it under like 25
Seems like
minutes
it's
or
being
whatever.
broken daily right
Yeah,
now.
and so he was saying that he has a theory that the game clock is kind of always out of sync. It's either a bit slower trying to race faster, so it's always playing this weird game of like catch up,
Hmm.
and that's why it has this problem of like sometimes it gets out of sync and like actually gets behind itself and then it catches up really quickly. I don't know.
It's
So yeah, I
strange.
had some technical issues with it too. I didn't have any game breaking bugs. I thought there were some bugs with quests, and they kind of maybe were some quest bugs. But if you log out of the game and log back in, it kind of snaps
Yeah,
back in.
yeah.
I will say the quests in From Software games are generally quite bonkers, and so like we can get into all that. Like I have some theories as to why they're that bonkers, but yeah, we can kind of take the conversation wherever you feel it.
So I'm going to kind of take, from my standpoint, I'm going to take my points in terms of the way reviews were for this game.
Sure.
I don't, numerical scores don't mean anything, but it's hard to ignore the 97 Metacritic for Elden Ring right
Right.
now,
Yeah.
which, I mean, listen, I'm going to say this, and I don't mean any disrespect to the game. I don't think the game is a 97. Like, what does that mean? I don't know. It doesn't mean I don't think it's a 9, but I can't believe. And I just, the problem I have with reviewers, I just think there was no way this game was ever going to review poorly, because the people that are going to review Souls games are the people that love them.
Right.
Yeah, for a major outlet. That's just going to be the way it is. And
Yeah.
it seems like I've said this forever, and it's like, you shall not trespass with any criticism with From games, unfortunately, but I don't give a shit. I'm going to say whatever.
Right.
These games get a pass in a lot of ways. Whether it's reused assets and animations, whether it's the user experience and obtuseness of certain things that other games, like, I know this for a fact, there's other games out there that would get destroyed for doing the exact same things that From games, where the excuse for From games is like, that's just all part of it. It's teaching you how to do the game. And what, you don't want to search for things, and the adventure, you need thing handheld to, dude. I've been playing games since you were probably never even existed. Like, I don't need this stuff, but it's 2022 sometimes. But just on point in terms of the tech issues, like, contrast it with Horizon Forbidden West that literally came out right beside it.
Yeah.
Where Horizon Forbidden West did have some tech issues, okay? But in terms of the grand scope of things, I'll even be forgiving and say they were equal, okay? Where I don't think they were. I actually think Forbidden West runs better, and they've addressed a ton of stuff. Now, Elden Ring has too, in patches, and it's gotten better. But at launch, like, all I saw in Forbidden West reviews were, the tech issues were abundant in the writing.
Right.
I didn't really hear almost anything to do with them in Elden Ring reviews.
I haven't actually read many reviews on it, so yeah.
And even if they were mentioned offhand, they were not knocked for that. And I'm kind of confused as to how that skips over. Like, what do we, as reviewers, what constitutes a penalty? Or like I understand, like, and I'm not even in reviews, I'm a firm believer in giving 10s.
Yeah.
Like, the 10 doesn't mean a perfect game. A 10 to me means an achievement that transcends achievement of the genre that transcends its small issues.
Right, sure.
Like, there are issues, maybe there aren't, I don't know, but I've never seen a game without any.
Right.
But maybe
I don't think there's a piece of software ever written that doesn't have some issues.
Yeah, like that, but you know what I'm saying? Like, you can award 10s. 10 doesn't mean perfect. There's no such thing. And even if there was perfect, every person's perfect is different,
Yeah,
right? So,
totally. Yeah, yeah.
but
I
you're
guess
perfect.
there's a conversation to be had about like a meta conversation about like what is the function of reviews and what's the is it like I always wonder, and I don't even have an answer to this. It's to me it's an open ended question. So uh, there used to be a bookstore in Seattle that I'd go to, and you'd go there and it's like the old video stores, right? It's like Jason's list of 10 movies you should
Yeah.
check out, right? To me, those are recommendations. That's based
Yes.
on like, okay, like me and Jason have similar taste, and I'm always going to like his stuff, and so I'm gonna rent that one because it's on his list. But that's very different, in my opinion, than being a critic, right? Like a critic's job is to kind of, I think, understand the state of the art, move the state of the art forward, make sure that they're challenging and pushing things kind of as a collective, blah, blah, blah. And it's unclear to me in the current where gaming sits today, it's unclear to me if reviewers are trying to be more critics or they're trying to be more recommenders.
It's a
Yeah.
great question, Steve. I stand with you. And I the problem with games media on the whole, we're getting sidetracked. We'll get back on in a minute, but games media on the whole is a profession that like games are bigger than films in terms of
Yeah.
income
Yeah. They're
and revenue.
massive. Yeah.
But the reviewers and people in the critical field are put on the level of film reviewers, like, but they're not paid as such, so
Right.
they don't retain the quality. Like anyone that's any good in that um, quote unquote profession
Right.
moves on
Yeah. Yeah.
because they can't
Interesting.
sustain their life in it. So it's an entry level position that's counted on to give professional criticism that they most aren't experienced enough to give.
Hmm.
Now, one could propose that the point of review is to give one, person's opinion.
Right. If
Yes,
it's an opinion
really
piece,
opinion,
which,
but
yeah.
I don't need like you come to an IGN or you come to a Polygon or wherever um for them to be some step above in terms of their experience
Hmm.
and critical nature and thinking of games, and they can weigh things differently. But I just don't think most of them have that the ability to do that, and that's I think where reviews get stuck on that speed bump of what you were talking about in terms of like I see this thing, like I'll see someone write a review and then I'll say, well, saying that it may not be a game for everyone. That line should never be in a review. Because
Hmm.
if you've done your job as a reviewer, you've told me if this game is for me
Right.
or if it's not for me.
Yeah.
You don't That is a line, a lazy line that should never be there. Like obviously if I'm reading a review of Gran Turismo 7,
Right.
I'm going to know if a vehicle game is for me or not, or if I want it to be the first time I jump in based on your words. I
Yeah.
don't need you to put that line in there.
Yeah.
Obviously, Elden Ring isn't going to be for everybody.
Right.
Like,
Right.
I don't need you to say that.
Yeah.
It's stupid.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
And also,
anyway,
to double down, I don't think it's a measure of success that a game is or isn't for everyone. Right. Like we don't rate movies that way. Right. We don't say like, oh, this is a popcorn, Sunday summer movie, and therefore it's a 10 out of 10. And, this super esoteric art film, is a 4 out of 10 because it's only for 40% of the
100%.
population.
Like
That's ludicrous, right?
sometimes the worst films are the ones that gross the highest,
Of
and the
course,
ones
yeah.
that win all the awards are
Yeah.
ones that no one saw.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
it's same in games, but this just happens to be hand in hand where the
Right.
commercial and critical sets are going to be together with the Elden Ring. But let's get back into the topic.
So
at
I will
hand.
say,
That was
just
our rant about games in your
no, that's
review.
good. Yeah, to compare like kind of Horizon, not yeah, and Elden Ring. I guess I haven't played. I've only played Elden Ring, so it's like I guess I would say Elden Ring still more or less stands alone as the game that still doesn't hold your hand and does all these things, right?
Mhm.
For better or worse. But it still like kind of stakes that ground of like every time a new one comes out, everyone's like, oh, it's too difficult or it needs more guidance or would you add an easy mode? And Miyazaki just stands up and he's like, look, I designed it this way and this is what I believe in. And everyone's like happy that exists. And I think that's why it has such like almost like religious level support with people because they're like, please don't take this one thing from me because it's the only one I have in AAA games to hold on to. And so I can appreciate that sentiment.
So
But
let's go ahead.
I will say, as I've gotten old, I don't know if it's older or as I played more games, the difficulty Well, first off, Elden Ring is much easier than previous From Software games.
So, would you say easier or accessible,
I okay,
or would you
so
say both?
I would say that I think that for me, it offers you more options to power your character up and to overpower your character, so that you can make challenges like hard boss fights easier
Okay,
than previous games. Whereas previous games, you could more easily and sometimes really truly get stuck on a boss,
sure,
and
because
you're
there was
like,
no, and
there's
even in
yeah,
Elden Ring, when you do hit your head up against difficulty, insofar now there are certain, you know, gates
yeah,
where narratively you won't be able to progress unless you push through,
correct,
but you
yes,
that doesn't mean you couldn't do anything else in the game. You could
yes,
go do other things, whereas
yeah,
I mean, yes, I guess you could do that in Bloodborne, but still you need to go along this path.
yeah,
Sekiro was even much more stringent, whereas that was, you only have one way to go,
yeah,
and you couldn't go off and level up
right,
without, you just have to keep hitting your head against this boss until you push through. But we can do the difficulty discussion, but I talked about that before, and I think we're in complete agreement.
right.
I respect that Miyazaki stands his ground, and I dismiss the people out there that demand some sort of change to his, the accessibility nature in terms of difficulty in his games, which is funny because a point I'm going to bring up later runs contrast to that, so I'm a hypocrite. But
Yeah, so I will say this one gives you more freedom and makes you feel, which I think is quite well done from a design perspective. It makes you feel like I'm still in the game, even though I'm effectively making my life easier. Like my hard, easy, difficult is very much built into the gameplay and more open, and you have more choices within the context of the gameplay. Whether it's as simple as like your spirit summons, or getting friends to help you, like those kind of classic From things with the addition of the spirit summons, or it's just like farming ruins and going getting stuff and over leveling yourself for enemies. So that I think makes it easier. But my point on that was like, as I get older, I find I had a kind of aha moment with Elden Ring, which was I get very little or increasingly less satisfaction in the terms of like, yes, I succeeded when I defeat a boss, and it's much more about, okay, good, now I can go see more of this cool world.
okay,
And that was like, but like I never framed it in that way, but I actually think retroactively that's how I've always seen those games. It's
okay.
like the bosses, like as a designer, I think the bosses in some From Software games are actually just broken. Like I think that the camera and the scale of the enemies is unfair, and I
It's
think that's ridiculous. Like I think the fights that are the most satisfying are when you're fighting a guy who's roughly the same size as you, and you can see their moves, and they're a humanoid kind of guy and stuff like that. Those feel like fun, fair
I'm
fights.
glad you brought that up because it's something. It's not just Elden Ring dependent. It's
No,
all their game dependent.
yeah,
And although I run contrast to you in terms of I see, that's a great thing about video games in general. This is not an Elden Ring. Um, and before I go on another tangent, it drives me insane where everyone acts like Elden Ring is and From games are the only games to do these things. Their bosses teach you things and teach you things along the way. Every fucking boss does that.
every
Like,
game ever made does that.
but the From games are the only games that they make excuses for the bosses kicking their ass. Like, if you played Bayonetta and a Bayonetta boss curb stomped you 5 times in a row, the same guys that are like, oh my god, I lost 300 times, but it taught me something every time. If you die 5 times to the boss of Bayonetta, you're going to be crying online.
Right.
It's just a double standard,
Sure.
as far as I'm concerned, and you won't convince me otherwise.
Right.
I think From games really benefit from this weird double standard. And it sounds like I dislike these games. Dude, I love these games.
Oh, they're some of my favorite ever. Yeah, yeah.
But I love the bosses.
Okay.
Okay. I love boss fights in games. I can't understand. I see these threads sometimes. It's like, I wish boss fights didn't exist. So I'm like, why are we playing video games? I don't know. I want this culmination of this buildup of this awesome enemy
Right.
that I got to face.
Yeah.
But that's me.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. It's not about difficulty. It's the game and the system and the camera are insufficient as the bosses grow in scale.
Right.
And it's just bullshit. Like, you have to get close to these bosses, the big ones, And then you can't really take in the
No,
attacks. You're
like
just
you can't really know what's going on, and the camera spins around you, and like, yeah, it's I just to frame this conversation. So I think Punch Out on Wii, I think we've talked about that before, has actually a very similar model in terms of combat to Dark Souls games, where
okay.
all enemies have strong read poses, follow through, they change it up. You have a limited set of moves, you have stamina, et cetera, et cetera. In many ways, Miyazaki probably just stole the idea from Punch Out and put it into kind of a more open setting. But the
And
thing
before
about,
people really jump on
yeah,
that, like if you think about it and pause, use two of these instead of one of these, you realize when all these things you boil them down, they were inspired by something. Miyazaki
right.
didn't just like create this thing. He was inspired. Like there's so many inspirations in these games, like creatively and gameplay wise, all over the place, and it makes perfect sense what you're saying.
So the big difference with Punch Out, though, is it's a fixed camera, and it's just you and the other person who's always on screen, and they actually dark out the background. So it's like perfect silhouette. That boxer, you really can just focus on the gloves, et cetera, et cetera. Even though the bosses also have, everyone's a boss, have special moves and little tricks, and some are gimmicky guys like King Hippo, and some are kind of more tricky like Bald Bull or something like that. But you always know why you lost. You always know why you succeeded. There's multiple levels of mastery, et cetera, et cetera. To me, that's kind of like the master class of how to do boss fights in a fair fighting way. And if that's a 10, From Software is not at that level, and they have some technical hurdles to overcome. They have some design hurdles to overcome. I wonder, and this is another thing I felt after playing through Elden Ring, that some of this design is intentionally done to provoke conversation and encourage reading guides. So you build this kind of meta community that helps market and spread word of mouth. And I think that's true of the random crazy stories they have, the very convoluted quests they have, the bosses that are like obscene in some cases, obscenely difficult to beat. And so I've started to believe it's much more calculated than maybe I originally believed.
Okay, let's put a pin on two of those points you talked about, which was the quest and the conversation that deviates outside of those games. And let's come right back to those and finish what we're talking about in terms of bosses.
Yeah.
Let's get back to something you said initially when you were breaking down your impressions about the end game bosses, because this is something that I've heard echoed by a myriad people.
Right.
That for all the beautiful design and scenery and locales and biomes that you're visiting, that the boss designs are bullshit. Like some of the one-hit mechanics, and it's not difficult. It's unfair, and it forces you not to fight in the same way. You're looking for ways to cheese them, more or less.
Yeah, and that's true. And I've talked to a number of people that have fought. Well, they're just without spoiling things. There are two last bosses. That's kind of what people think.
Yeah.
In terms of like, there's kind of the boss that everyone will get funneled towards, and then there's the boss that people can find.
Yes.
Right. For me, the storytelling on that is bizarre, and it didn't make sense to me. And I could go watch some videos, and they'd probably fill in the holes. But that felt like the path I went down. I honestly, not to be dismissive or kind of flippant, but I almost felt like they tacked on the last boss just because someone did a character design, they just threw that last boss.
You got to use this, yeah.
That's what it felt like, and there are moves that last boss does that I still don't know how to, and I probably died 100 times to it or something. I still don't know how to avoid.
Huh.
And that to me is, that seems unfair.
Yeah, like it's not the whole thing that Souls fans hide behind, from fans hide behind, of it teaching players,
right?
The whole gameplay aspect, that just goes out the window because it isn't true.
Yeah,
it's like I mean that boss right there.
Yeah,
she has some bullshit mechanics in her second phase. Like that's just not like it's not like, what is that? That's not good game design. That's not good boss design.
Yeah, that boss I had to respec, and it's a way of cheesing. But it is a way of cheesing. Like I had to respec blood so that I could burn down her health fast enough, because I went like sorcerer or katana, right? So I don't know what that's called, but I'm sure there's a Souls name for that. Where I was like gravity magic, and then the Moonveil katana, and that was great. Like it worked really well, and I was able to beat all the bosses. And it's really fun actually, because you can't block and you have to learn how to dodge and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But for her, it was impossible. I didn't feel like I could have played it forever, and I felt like I would have never been able to beat
There's a
her.
lot of people
Yeah,
say like the respecting, which again seems to run counterintuitive to a lot of what From games were designed, where you could really do well, except faith builds in previous games kind of sucked ass.
right.
Um, I guess that's not exactly true because there are certain ways to play the game that really would not be successful.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, but the respecking to beat certain bosses seems prevalent.
yeah. It seemed like, well, for me, it was necessary. I also, this was the first game I played while I was chatting with a bunch of other friends that were playing it, and the general sentiment up there was, uh, it's okay. And for them, as I said, I never played with other people really, or gone through it while sharing ideas. They're like, oh, you have to read guides and figure out how to farm ruins and cheese things in order to make it through a From game. That's part of the fun.
So let's move to the next point
Yeah,
then.
yeah,
Which that is hilarious because again people like a revelation from the gods, a game that doesn't handhold you, yet every single one of those guys are running online for guides and things to figure things out. They're not really figure things out for themselves. They're basing it on someone just so. What's the difference between it being in the game in some sort of way in terms of a UX design, or I don't know how they would implement something like that for gameplay, or and what's the difference between pausing, there is no pause, but pausing and running to YouTube to watch a guide to farm or find this or figure out this boss. I don't get the difference.
yeah. I would say that when I watch the lore videos,
So I
I
think that's a bit different,
no, but
although
I'm just going to say when I watch them, like Vita Video or however you say that guy's
yeah,
name, I so wish I had the patience
same.
of a kid. Really, if I was a kid, if you and I were like back, on Penny Lane and kind of like, I think we might have the energy and patience to really, and we didn't have any other competing games and the kind of social media and all the other distractions we have to deal with nowadays were reduced.
Yeah,
I think these games might be like I think they would just blow our minds, and we would find all these secrets out on our own, just like we did in Fantasy Star and Zillion and
yeah,
all these other things. But I think in the climate that exists, I think Miyazaki's maybe real genius is like really embracing that, because I do believe there's a psychological difference. It seems arbitrary, but there is a psychological difference between feeling like you took the time. It sounds so weird when I say it a lot.
yeah,
You
yeah.
took the time to read about it online, and you found it out rather than the game telling you how to do it.
Yeah.
You feel special for reading it online.
Feels special for riding the coattails
Yeah,
of
and
this.
then you could go and share it with your friend who didn't read it online, and now you feel special not only in the game and your accomplishments, but in the kind of in your your friend group.
Yeah.
So that I think that's it. That to me, that's it. It's just like it's that little tweak. But if From Software would kind of coach you more, then you wouldn't feel
It would
special
lose
for
that
having learned it.
mystique.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
yeah,
lose that mystique. But yeah, like I can't deny it works
yeah,
because
yeah.
the obtuseness, and again, it's that double standard. If another game did this, the obtuseness, everything that the reviews are filleting themselves over, they would be like, I can't, it doesn't tell me what to do. It's strange and I couldn't figure it out. And it's not a FromSoft game, so automatic deductions.
Right.
But since it is, and they've conditioned the audience to expect it, it's just something that is. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I don't know. I guess I just don't buy. I respect I can, I can critically look at all these aspects individually instead of wrapping them all into one.
right.
And I think some of them work, and I think some of them don't. I don't mind the the lack. I don't want someone to hold my hand. We broke this down in our previous conversation
Right.
with tutorials and all stuff.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't want that. I want the
Right.
game to teach me those lessons. Below, you so eloquently described why Below did it in game
Right.
and why it was successful. And I think Elden Ring does those things as well. But do you think there could have, because of the game's open world tour, venture into a massive open world, which is a departure?
Yeah.
Uh, do you think it could have did with a little bit more?
I would say that it is like I don't know how if you maintain the From Softwareness, I think it would be incredibly hard to kind of guide you through it. Because their model of like little esoteric clues in like an item description, or you happen to talk to this. I mean, there's one character early on that you have to revisit a fire and go at night in order for her to appear, and that's a pretty important quest line that you can kick off or miss. And I don't. That's in a like in a From Software game where it's always kind of been about going back, going to the next camp, going to the next fire until you get the shortcut, come back to the main hub fire. I don't know why you would ever think to revisit a fire.
Sure.
So like stuff like that is weird. I don't know how they would have done it. Could they have done more of it? I'd have to think about that more. Like, is it possible? I will say
like,
this.
I know there's no pause screens, but I do think, again, this goes back to my hypocritical nature. Like, in terms of maintaining difficulty, I don't want them to touch it. I think it's fine. I do think, since they've never made an open world game, so technically they're not really, it's not sacrilegious because this is a first time for them.
Sure.
I think there should have been some sort of quest log in terms of, I don't mean on the screen. And I know there's no pause screen, but to keep in the vein where you could pull up a scroll or a book that you have. Now you're still in danger. If a monster or an enemy attacks you while you're doing this, you're vulnerable. But little notes. I ran into so and so here. I don't know how you do it, but there is a way to do it. And there's also a way where purists there could be an option in the thing to just, I don't want that.
Right. Sure.
I don't want my logbook or my adventurer's book or something. Right.
I will say,
beyond the realm of reality that an adventure, the Tarnished one, would have some sort of log for this world.
No, that's totally true. Yeah, I think that's true. I don't know. I can kind of, I like and dislike quest logs and stuff like that. I will say that
I agree.
I also got there is so much lore and so many new names and new places to remember. It is almost untenable. So there are definitely aspects of the map. Like, you'll go and as you explore the world, some guy will mention like the Altus Plateau or whatever. And you look on, and I can't remember exactly what the map looks like, but there's definitely things that key characters tell you, like, go to this area and find this person. And I can remember looking up on the map, like where the hell that place is, and I have no idea where it is.
Yeah.
Now, I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe that there is no label there are labels on the map for some areas, and there aren't labels from other major areas that are key to you knowing like where a boss is or where you need to go next. So those little details I think could have been tightened up, or maybe I just missed it. That's on me, I guess. I will say the first boss that you have to fight, you are fairly well guided to it.
Mm-hmm.
After that boss, when I defeated that boss, I really truly had no idea where to go.
Yeah.
And I spent quite a while trying to figure out what the heck to do. I can't even recollect how I figured out where to go. I think I just kind of stumbled on it.
Yeah.
And that happened a couple times, which is good. And they probably encourage you to go open world, but that was inconsistent. It felt like they channeled you towards the first boss. And there was kind of an obvious main line. And then there was like these offshoots. So you kind of knew you were going off the main quest. And then they kind of dropped that pretense and like, okay, you're on your own. And that felt a little jarring because I felt like they'd set me up to be not guided, but you had the glowing light stuff and you were supposed to follow that.
And then it's like the training wheels. They're not even training wheels. It's just the game design structure. Just it's like it those things that were holding it in place just let go.
Yeah.
And this is where, this is going to be purely preference. It's not, I don't think it's a good or bad thing. I think it could go either way. It's preference. Right. For me, I don't like that.
Right.
I don't like it just being, okay, figure it out. I don't like it. I will figure it out within the content. To me, I don't like games that are just, it's a game. Here's the game. There's no goals.
Right.
Yes, I still know what the end goal of Elden Ring is, but like, I have this gigantic area. I don't need these things all over. Like, I don't need Ubisoft.
Right.
I don't even need 15% of Ubisoft. Mm-hmm. Okay. And again, for the purists, they could shut this off if they more like, but in terms of the open world nature, this isn't like, it's not like playing Dark Souls or Bloodborne. It's not like that. This game is so much bigger in every
Oh,
capacity.
it's ridiculous. Compared
It's like
size
at
is
least,
nuts. Yeah,
you know, there's this massive world, and as soon as you finish that first major boss, it's just like, okay, now fucking what? Like,
yeah, yeah,
where like there could have been something. And in terms of going to the story again with the lore, I hear Vati Vidya with his gorgeous voice break this down so eloquently,
yeah,
and I sit there like this. I
yeah,
love it.
yeah. It's awesome.
But
Yeah,
it's, I mean, where is that in the fucking game?
yeah,
Where is that? Like Bloodborne's story and lore is honestly, when I listen to that guy talk about it, I'm like, holy shit.
yeah,
Like that is awesome.
yeah,
Where was it in the game? I shouldn't have to just it honestly what he does, who has time for that? And it's funny because fans will take what that guy did and then be like, oh well, that's the story. Like it's all there.
right.
Dude, none of that, almost none of that is there. 75% of that he took and like wove together from this item
Right.
alluded
It
to
is
this item,
impressive. It's
which
amazing what he
this,
does. Yeah.
and then they're taking out little um background things and pulling those forward which refer to this, and it's honestly impressive, but like give me a little more. Like
Mhm.
they will have these cool cutscenes and cool narrative spells, but then it's just like there's hours and hours and hours of nothing.
Right.
I just think there could have been more. Like i
I,
i like their story and lore is so good, just give me more of it.
yeah, I
I
think that I wish that, yeah, I'm trying to think of a quest line that I've done in a Souls game that I like, and then like I did it. And they're very few and far between. Most of the time, I feel like I get stuck or I just don't even know what the heck's going on and I forget about it. And, I would love it if I got those things like Vita Video gets, like how he gets it at that level. If they could weave that in, and I think that would be fantastic. It would definitely take away from
like
people
I don't
talking about
want
it
them
online, but
I don't want everything because their way of storytelling works, okay? And when I see other people do it, it doesn't work for them because it's just like I feel like some stories have gotten to the point where like leaving things movies have done this lately too. And again, I'm breaking from what we're talking about. I'm just using a general example. It's just like films have gotten like for instance, the film The Road
yeah, sure.
and the book,
Yeah, I never read the book,
Cormac
but I saw
McCarthy.
the film. Yeah,
But same thing, how it ends, incredibly open ended.
right,
Even in the world, you don't even know what happened in the world.
right,
Okay,
right.
it works for that film.
Yeah,
But
sure.
there's for every film that does something like that, there's 20 that try to ape
Yeah,
that style of open net endedness,
right.
and it just comes off to me as lazy.
Yeah, sure.
Like you couldn't figure out how to tell your story, how to give me what happened in this world, and how to finish it. So you're just going to leave it open ended and then say that's smart. Oh, you can figure that out. No,
Right.
like sometimes you got to tell me what the fucking story is, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I think there's a happy medium between that and like here is every single thing along the way, in terms of a from game. But
I will say on that point, I will say I recently watched The Green Knight, and I had
okay,
not read the book slash poem, and then I did read Beowulf in high school, and I was thinking, I thought, what Miyazaki is maybe trying to do, or his story writer, of which I guess George R. R. Martin was part of for this one, he's almost trying to tell like a surrealist poem about an adventure, and he wants you to feel like that. So
okay.
he almost intentionally wants you to not make sense. And
Hmm.
but that's convenient too.
It is convenient,
that was
and
what you
that's a
put it
good
in.
point. It's
But
like
I
there's
will say I definitely always feel in those From games that I'm in this strange, fantastic world. That it's bigger than me. There's all this lore I could dig into, but I'm as the character don't have the tools to figure it all out. Blah blah. So in that respect, it's kind of a masterclass. Um, in many ways, like what we're talking about is a little bit about the meta about what a game is and isn't, and how much should it be about the experience for you and how you feel as the character versus delivering a particular set of achievements or making you feel accomplished or whatever. And you know, the From games do it probably the best balance of like this immersing you in an experience, and still very much like you're playing an action role-playing game. You
Yeah.
know, it's kind of like this one-of-a-kind experience, and this kind of one-of-a-kind, and that's not one-of-a-kind action role-playing. It's an action role-playing game that is actually, its bones have been done in many, many different ways in the past, and
It's
it's
just
using things from
modernized.
Castlevania and Zelda and all this stuff, and combat from like a Punch-Out. But definitely the settings and the experience and the grandeur and like the holy smokes, this is bigger than me, and like that's pretty unique. And I think the storytelling that it does fits that kind of oddness. I can't figure it out. There's hit secrets. I don't know.
Like, I guess to sort of wrap a bow on this aspect of the conversation, in terms of giving more story and lore, like rather than me having to go watch a Vati video, like a lore book that is accessible from the home screen or something to that effect, where it would be a completely optional, an opt-in thing. If I chose to do that, leave the game alone entirely. If you want to connect the yarn with the item descriptions and everything, that is as it is. But then you have this traveler's guide lore book that you could possibly delve in. I don't know. Go ahead.
I will say on that, I think that the way you picked up stuff into your inventory and the way you organize your inventory should have been better.
Because I think the inventory management and honestly their menu systems for the most part are just bad, flat out bad.
Yeah. So there was oftentimes I would pick things up and I would lose them. Like I'd be like, what the hell? It'd take me a while to find them. And although I don't think they do a good enough job establishing early on, like speaking as a designer, they don't do a good enough job early on teaching you that reading about items makes it so you get these aha moments that make you prevail within the quest. Like they could definitely connect those dots much more strongly. And it's kind of like, so Shovel Knight, right? To totally take a different game entirely, does a really great job early on of teaching you that secret walls always have a weirdly shaped block to identify them. Okay. And you kind of hit that little wall, and then you're like, oh, boom, I got a turkey, or I opened up a thing and got like 1,000 gems or whatever. And then you spend like literally the rest of the game
hitting every wall,
always looking for all these little walls and stuff, right? Yeah. And so, to me, that's a better way to do it, right? It teaches you this thing, it gives you a positive feedback loop. It's not heavy-handed. You learn to take all this stuff. Now, if you had that mechanism, you also need an additional thing to just allow an average human, not a computer, to scale with all the different like esoteric text and it's like reading Silmarillion, right? Like the Lord of the Rings kind of book. Like you read that book and it's like it's insane, right? It's like what the hell? And who's this guy is almost exactly the same name as that guy, but it's off by 3 letters, and like you quickly get lost, right? And unfortunately, from games can run into the same problem, and so you need a device, whether it's like the cork board that you draw strings together, or you have a way of cataloging or something. You need some device to help a mere mortal piece this together, because I think if you could do that, you would feel smarter for doing it.
Sure, and it's totally optional. I mean, because I don't care what anyone says. There's a better way to do it. I'm not saying we have the answers here.
Sure, yeah.
But there is a better way to do that.
Right,
because I think a lot of that narrative and story and lore that they put a lot of time into just it's like the sand just falls through your hand. And
right.
I actually think in this instance, yes, it's preference, but I don't think there's any way a game like this is worse by you knowing more about it.
Right.
And but I at the same time, I don't think you're going to lose any of that thing. I like what you said. I like the feeling that these games are bigger than me.
Right.
Like Bloodborne and Dark Souls, Demon Souls did have it, but I really felt it in Bloodborne.
Yeah.
Like the Lovecraftian nature, the cosmic horror, but even there was that, and then there was so much other underneath it. It was beyond me, and I liked that. But again, there could have been more lore, more story in my face or accessible to me that I would not have lost any of that.
Like Bloodborne's an interesting example. One of the this is a spoiler for anyone who's not played Bloodborne. But so Father Gascone, or however you say that guy's name, is one of the coolest boss I've ever fight. That was an amazing boss fight.
Yeah.
It's also ridiculously hard, but anyway, it was a really cool boss fight. And there is a way you get a little like music box or whatever it is that like stuns the werewolf guy, right? Phase 3.
Yep.
And I knew that when I was interacting with the knocked doors and stuff like that, I had a strong inclination that there was some quest in here that I could go and figure out how to get that music box and it would be useful for me. But I actually never got that music box. I looked up a guide on it, like read a guide on it and figured out that music box. And then I was able to beat the boss.
Okay.
And to me, that's kind of an example. Now, maybe I was just lazy or I was in a rush or I should have paid more attention. And maybe From Software has data that like 85% of people get the music box. And so it's a great design. But for me, I felt like it could have been done a bit better. It was a little too vague.
Obtuse,
I think that is compounded in Elden Ring because it's so massive.
The scale, yeah.
Yeah. So
I agree with you. So where do we go from here? I guess we could go to the more technical aspects that are a little less interesting in terms of, there was a conversation from a Ubisoft dev that critiqued the user experience. Now, considering the source, a lot of people were quick to jump on him.
Sure.
But I do think he had a point.
Right. I saw that thread come up. I didn't delve into it. Was it, so I used to be a user experience designer at Microsoft. So user experience is like very broad, right? User experience
it's huge. Like,
can be everything, right? So was he referring to the UI, like the menu system, or?
Someone had put a point to him, and in that was a criticism of Ubisoft games, which honestly are deservedly so criticized, in everything but the commercial aspects. Because I think they've made open world formulaic, whatever, but this isn't a conversation about that. And he says, no, we would have done it better. We would have cared about user experience and that. And it's, guys were so quick to jump on him because From Software games can do no wrong. But I do think he had a point in his thing. I do think there are a lot of things that were left to be desired, like for just a small thing, like how you navigate what you can jump off and what you can't, and what you can survive and what you can't.
Yeah, that is broken. Because I definitely, at the end game, when I was like kind of trying to figure out like because there are different endings in Elden Ring, right? I think there's like 6 or 7 or something. And I was trying to figure out which way to fall. I'm trying to get into areas I haven't found before to see if I want to follow different paths. And there were a couple times where I jumped, and for sure I would have landed on like a pillar and been fine. But because it was in a different zone, it just kills you.
Yeah.
And that's crap. That sucks. That I understand as a dev, you have to make those calls at some point because the world's so massive. But those things do break kind of your feeling that you can explore this world and it's open and all that kind of stuff.
Especially for a game that's so crippling, that penalizes you to the
so
extent
aggressively.
Yeah, like deaths aren't just throwaway things. It's not another life to spare. It's a loss of 200,000 runes or whatever, or
right.
And just and there's 1,000 other examples like that. I just think there's, and I don't know, man. Like even some of the way the menus and the quick swap options are there, I just don't think they're as good as they should be.
I think it's interesting. I will say I recently have been playing the indie game Tunic.
How is that game?
I'll come back to that, but I was thinking that so you can drink a potion in that game, and it's interesting that there are little touches in Elden Ring that are very smart and do get overlooked. So, for example, in Elden Ring, if you drink a flask and then drink it right away, you'll immediately drink the next one without resetting the animation. So you could like guzzle like 3 flasks really quickly.
Yeah.
But Tunic, it doesn't have that. The dev made it so you have to like finish animation and then re-drink the next flask, finish animation, re-drink the next flask. And for whatever reason, the flasks do very little to heal you. Okay. Right? And so you kind of, I felt like, okay, it doesn't heal you enough and the animation's way too slow. Wow, I really appreciate Elden Ring's design solution there. So there are some UX things that are well done in Elden Ring, but like I'm trying to, when I was playing Elden Ring, I was likening it to using like almost a tool, like Blender is a 3D tool I use to build games, and that is not at all approachable. Right? It's 3D modeling. It's like all shortcut keys. The menu's like impenetrable, but once you learn it, you can be really good at it.
Okay.
And so that is intentionally designed for that, and it's well designed for the intermediate to expert user. It's terribly designed for the beginner. Mm-hmm. And that is maybe what the Ubisoft guy was saying.
That, I think that's really what
this is not. and so there's kind of
The onboarding.
there's a saying in design. It's like, beginners are only beginners for a short amount of time. The overall majority of users are intermediate, and equally, there's only a small number that are experts. So you really should target the intermediate folks to have. You got to onboard, or else you won't even have intermediate users. And you've got to have people that are experts, because that's why you're built. That's where you really make your money on those guys, right? You got to make it for intermediates and optimize for that. So I guess that's what From Software did. But to this day, I can't remember how you select your second set of arrows in Elden Ring.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that's weird, right? Yeah.
Like
There's some weird things. Yeah.
Yeah, and for it really emphasizes quick swaps and weapon options. Yeah, and it's just there's got to be, there's so much we're talking about right now, and I probably should have made notes to this, because I had this one example of it something that should be seamless, but it isn't, and it sounds stupid. I'm not grasping at straws. I know what I want to say. I just can't remember what exactly it was, and it's a really stupid decision that should have been streamlined. But I guess on that, one of the major additions, in addition to the open world, was the horse, Torrent.
Yeah,
what do you think of that?
I thought the horse was done quite well, actually. I like the horse. Now, I haven't played Red Dead Redemption 2. I did play Zelda, like Breath of the Wild. I played through The Witcher. I liked the horse. I thought it was essential in an open world to be able to move around that quickly. The double jump was kind of cool. In some ways, it's kind of immersion breaking, and I kind of maybe set the wrong precedence in terms of like double jump to me is a very gamey, arcadey thing.
Yeah,
and like from an experience perspective, it's fun, but it's not grounded. So like I understand the trade-offs of why they did that. But I like the horse. The horse is the mount is actually for at least I'd say the first half of the game is an easy mode.
Yeah, it trivializes some encounters because the AI can't really keep up with it in some ways.
Exactly. Yeah. Like a lot of the mounted bosses, and if you're on the horse and they're not, you can really take guys out pretty easily.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, I think they put that in there both as a way to get around the world, but also as a way of saying like, hey, if you want to see this world, you can do that pretty easily if you're on this horse.
I agree.
Or at least a lot easier than running
where
around.
I was getting at in terms of how it affected encounter design and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think From Software games are also, this is something that game designers talk to think about a lot, especially when they're trying to balance an RPG. I think From Software games are intentionally designed so you can break them, you can overpower stuff.
And that's the thing, these games, they get such a rap for being difficult, and yes, some of them are, and the end game of Elden Ring truly is difficult, but in the wrong ways. Like there's a way to do difficulty, and there's a way not to do difficulty.
Yeah.
But I honestly, I truly believe these games have never been all that difficult when you get right down to it. Like they can be difficult, you can make them more difficult, but if you're trying to win or break the game, you assuredly can, and you can do it pretty quickly.
Yeah, and it's almost to me, it's intentionally designed in a good way, so that you, like, when you learn early on that there are things in treasure chest or like glowing little balls that can get you stuff that is useful and interesting. And unfortunately, it also, because there's a lot of variety, takes you down paths which are totally useless. Like you might get a sword that seems cool and actually sucks, but there's enough of. And again, the meta game of going into lore and stuff, and not lore so much, reading guides online, there are a lot of ways where you can find interesting pieces of equipment and builds and stuff like that makes you very, very powerful. Mm-hmm. And I think that's very intentional, both to make you feel special, to encourage you to read guides, but also to make the game accessible and approachable.
So, in terms of the scope, do you think... building on what you said, the rewards for the side content and the things you do you think they were worth it, or do you think they just became redundant and you were just doing it to explore for explorer's sake?
They do start to get a bit redundant.
Yeah.
And I felt that in the first third of the game, I felt more magic, kind of like, oh, I found this cave and what's in it. And then you're like, once you find like your 15th catacomb, you're like, oh, okay. These are the puzzle dungeons. Like I get it, and you start seeing the kind of the blueprints of the thing a bit. However, I don't know if So Skyrim to me was the best example of a game, and it didn't sustain itself for the whole game either. But
No.
Skyrim was the best example of a game for me that I can remember where I just wandered around and wandered into really really cool experiences that really did feel unique that I never had any guides for. I just like walked into a vampire cave and like it
Yeah.
was way overpowered. Everything was way overpowered, but I managed to chip my way through it and then got this like cool orb or whatever out of it. And
Or
those are
like a
truly
wood
like
tower or
yeah,
something.
whatever
Yeah.
it is, yeah. And those are truly like probably some of the best experiences I've ever had in gaming because it felt like only I did it and I found it without help and it was an emergent story and all this kind of stuff. So I felt more of that in the beginning of Elden Ring than I did at the end. At
And then
the
the
end, I
magic
was
wears
like,
off
"What
of
the
it.
hell am I supposed to do now? Okay, I got to do this." How would I kept on asking myself, "Would I have been able to figure that out without a guide?" Or
Okay.
asking a buddy. And increasingly near the end, I kept on saying, "Like, no, I'm not sure I would have." And that's a bummer. But it also maybe it's a sign of like, look, I feel there's a lot of fatigue in general in the world today. I think I don't have the stamina and energy that I used to have, like, even 20 years ago, never mind like 40 years ago. And so I can't really parcel that apart, like, whether
Mhm.
it's the game's fault or it's more my fault. So,
But at some point, it does seem like when the magic wears off, and you can't have uniqueness with a world this size throughout.
it's very
So
hard. Yeah.
eventually, do you feel that asset reuse? Do you really start to feel it and see it?
I felt that it's probably one of the best versions of not showing its hand and not showing you that
Okay.
it's reusing stuff. But you definitely can see it. And, I will say that after having designed some games, it's very hard for me to even play a game without like looking at all the cracks and like, oh, how did they do this little thing? And like, you're almost testing the game as much as you're playing it. But yeah, like I felt that they, as good of a job as I could expect, or kind of the high bar for AAA games, they did it better than other games have done.
I see.
But it's still not perfect, right? Like,
No, and just one of my last points that I saw, I do there from games to the point. Sekiro aside, the animation reuse I think is really it's there, and I see it a lot. And
sure,
from a critical aspect, I think that's something that not enough people really pushed on, because I see this picked apart in other games. Like, I'll give you an example: the God of War Ragnarok sequel coming out. Okay, everyone
right?
after that trailer
Yeah,
all
I know.
over the boat animation.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
that's one animation in a game that is astronomically gorgeous.
Right. Yeah,
Yet we have Elden Ring, and there's reused assets from, years, like a decade back.
oh
that
sure,
are
yeah. You can tell
wildly
they have their like model of how to do bosses and what's a giant and what's a guy with like a spider guy. Yeah, totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's true.
So, and that's, I just think from a critical point, and it just builds on my point. I just think there's a lot of things that, for as amazing this game is, critically, there's some things that get complete passes that other
Right.
games franchise they just don't get.
Yeah,
They don't get that hall pass.
Yeah.
But all in all, I guess we can wrap this conversation up in, on a really good note. You said you don't really know where it sits in terms of the pantheon of From games.
yeah.
If you had to give me your three right now, what would it be?
So my first From game was Dark Souls 2. So
Okay.
like a lot of people's was Demon Souls or Dark Souls 1, but mine
Yeah.
was for Dark Souls 2, and a lot of people hate Dark Souls 2. But because it was my first one, I thought it was great. It was the one where I was like, this game is totally broken. Only a psychopath would play this game. So like, no, this actually makes a lot of sense. It's brilliant. Like that was like, the 8 hours or 2 day, or I can't remember how long it was, but where you go through that transition, and people often talk about that. Like once it clicks, it really clicks, right?
Yeah.
So, and it's interesting. I only did that because my buddy was like, no, this game's awesome. You have to play it. And I think I
Gotcha.
played it a day, and I was like, you're nuts. This is insane. And then he's like, no, it's good. Stick with it. And so even as an old school, like Nintendo generation kid, I was even fell victim to no, this game is nuts, right? So Dark Souls 2 is up there. I don't know where it ranks. I think I like the opening of Bloodborne better than any of the From Software games. I think it's a masterclass. For me, Bloodborne goes a little bit crazy wackadoo with its story and like its lore. Like, what I almost wished it was more grounded in the werewolfy kind of Lovecraftian stuff rather than I don't even know how to describe it. Kind of the end, it's totally bonkers.
The cosmic, yeah.
Cosmic, yeah, like, yeah. I also hated that spider boss and the big open, like endless plane. But
Oh,
that's just
Rom.
that's just
Yeah.
a random one. So I would say, Dark Souls 2. I've never played Demon Souls because I've never owned a PlayStation, but I've never played that. So I would say Dark Souls 2, Bloodborne, and then Elden Ring are my top three, kind
Okay.
of all time. If I had to rank them, I probably would put Bloodborne at the top, and then Elden Ring, and then probably Dark Souls 2. But yeah.
Okay. No, I can't. I can't say. For me, I can't say anything about Elden Ring yet. I mean, it'll
Right.
probably end up there. We'll see. I'm a. It's funny because like I Skyrim is that game that gave me all that magic, but it's a
Yeah.
game I would never want to play again because I think in the grand scheme of things, I think it played like shit, and I don't think the excuse of well just mod it that doesn't
Right.
fly to me. Like
Right.
the game is what it is. If
Yeah.
I have to mod it to make it play good, then so be it. But that experience to me is irreplaceable in so
Sure.
many
Yeah.
capacities. So
Yeah.
I'm hoping Elden Ring gives me that when I really, really decide to go.
Yeah, that'd be
full
interesting
bore.
to hear your thoughts on that when you're through with it. I will say, I still got more joy out of and uniqueness out of playing through Below than I did Elden Ring, and maybe any of the From Software games if I really think about it. To me, Below better captures the feeling of being this lone character and allows you, kind of in a big dungeon all by yourself,
Mhm.
and allows you to get through the whole thing. And I never felt like I needed to reference a guide or I was unguided or was too
Yeah.
esoteric. Now, it's not, it's like a fraction of the scale of a Souls game. It doesn't have anywhere near the variety, it doesn't have any of the lore. It's all environmental storytelling. But that unique feeling of like really feeling like an adventurer, I think it really captured that.
But I'm a firm believer in bigger is rarely better in video games. I truly
Right.
believe that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we've talked about that again before. You see, the bigger it gets, it's harder to fill with quality content, and you end up settling for doing a lot of things average to good as opposed to
Right.
doing a few things excellent. But for any fans out there who really want to look into a masterclass in game design, Steve has mentioned Below all the time. So really, that's a game, and you would recommend that for aspiring game developers too.
Yeah, I think
look
to
at.
understand there's a lot of polarizing commentary on it. There's a lot of things it does really well. It's not perfect, like we talked about. There's no
Yeah,
perfect game.
yeah.
I would also say in the same vein, like look at Rain World. I think Rain World does a lot of the same kind of things, captures the feeling of being in an ecosystem, is a different kind of gameplay in that it's unforgiving, but you very much are in the middle of the ecosystem. You're not, the alpha predator, which is an interesting take inside of a game. You can prey on some things, but other things prey on you. Yeah, I think those two games for me are, and then the classics like Out of This World, Another World. I think is all, and Flashback. Those games are like must plays. Those four are like must plays for me.
So, I guess for me, number one's Bloodborne, and I don't know. It's hard for me. I will say, as much as I like the Demon Souls remake, I think is incredible.
Right, I've heard great things about it.
But I still, as far as the gameplay has come so far, that I really feel like it's hard for it to stack up with Bloodborne or even Dark Souls 3. Like it's hard. I found it hard to go back and play it with what I knew these games could be.
Right.
And it's always been. I don't know if you played the Batman Arkham games. You ever played those?
I've played a bit of them. I haven't actually played through them. No.
Okay, well, there's Arkham Asylum, which is kind of heralded as the best.
Yes.
And it's the first, but I maintain that I think City is the better game because the gameplay additions that are not bolted on, they become essential after you've experienced it. And then going back is really difficult
interesting
to digest, and even the locale, it's much more limited in what you see. But I do agree that Asylum tone wise is the best of all of them. So I think that's what people gravitate to. But anyway.
No, I
I
studied the Batman Asylum games. Or actually, the lock-on system in Unto the End is inspired by Arkham, where it's like kind of fluid. And, like it's not you're locked on this guy and then you have to only manually switch. There's kind of like Arkham games are really great. Probably one of the best games of doing top-down-ish kind of group fighting, where you can pivot. You can have a character you're focused on, but you can kind of pivot between guys. yeah, Unto the End used a similar system to that. So
Okay.
I've studied it from that perspective. I think that action system is much more elegant than like the Dark Souls system. It'd be interesting to see a Dark Souls game with an Arkham kind of application, actually.
I know we're running short on time,
Yeah.
so we won't get into it, but another day. It's just there was a game that recently came out, Final Fantasy Origin Stranger of Paradise, and
Right.
um I break that down in my previous podcast. I won't go into here, but the game is just, I don't even know why it exists. But specifically as to our conversation, it chose to go the Dark Souls route in terms of its combat. Well, Neo, because Team Ninja, they
Right.
take Team Ninja's engine and they worked on it. It's the
Right.
Neo engine, which is
Right.
also Souls inspired. But I'm telling you, I don't know why they chose to go that route. That game would have been far better served if they went with again, I used this example before, but not this specifically, but the Devil May Cry route, a more
Yeah.
stylish action game.
Right. Yeah.
That would have fit it far better than
Right.
this stoic, stiff, slow running. It just doesn't fit the universe. And I don't know why so many people gravitate to the, well, I know why they do it, because they think it's the new hotness, right?
Right. Yeah.
But you got to make design decisions that serve the game, not because of what a trend is. But
Right. Yeah.
it is what it is. So for me, really, it's like Bloodborne, Sekiro,
Yeah.
and I'd say Dark Souls 3, even
Yeah.
so much as if I love Demon Souls universe and game. But I think Elden Ring will be there when I finish up.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to know what you think, actually.
So, any closing thoughts, or you think
Well,
we're
that
done?
was a lot of fun to chat. I think anyone who's out there should definitely play Elden Ring. And even just you can take you can take 10 to 20 hours of it and get a really good sense of it.
I agree.
I don't think you need to play the whole thing.
That's why I was confident jumping in. Like, I have enough experience with these games, and I've digested enough to confidently speak about it. No, I'm not, like, it's not like I'm breaking down mid game and end game stuff.
Right.
But there's just lessons that you can talk about.
Right.
So yeah.
So like to that end, I would say anyone who wants to make a game should definitely play it and should learn what it does well and what it doesn't do well. In terms of experience and immersion and making you feel part of this bigger world, giving you choice, but also guiding you, at least in the beginning. I hope someone thinks long and hard how to make a better version of it. It gives us better stories and figures out a way to connect the dots in terms of narrative, and allows you to do emergent storytelling without doing overt hand holding and all that kind of stuff. Because I think that's where games are at their best. And so,
yeah.
And
I guess in me, from a critical standpoint, in closing, all those things that you said, I completely agree with. But if you're out there and, don't succumb to the pressure of a community, which seems almost cult-like and overbearing at times, because I don't care what anyone says. They really are. These games do have flaws, and they're not universal. Some of them bug certain person more than the other person.
Sure.
But if you feel there are things, don't be afraid to talk about them and voice your opinion, because you have every right to feel the way you feel. And I just, don't, just because you see the 97, what's wrong with me? Why do I not feel what the reviews
Sure.
are telling me?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of things wrong with this game, but that doesn't mean the game isn't amazing and everyone should play it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's just the way it is. So yeah, that's we can talk about, I think we're going to be talking about this game for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that'll be the end of the Critic versus Dev Elden Ring conversation.
Awesome. It was a lot of fun, man.
All right, man. We'll talk really soon.
Okay. Sounds good.
And enjoy your evening. Stephen
Sounds good.
Danton.
Take it easy,
All right,
buddy. Cheers.
Peace.